Yeah, I was aware of that world.
Wonderful that you're joining our team. We need that, his level of engagement.
Get a chance to do much fishing?
I hear you.
No, I haven't either.
When do you finish?
No.
Same with me. I was out with a headlamp last night trying to get all my.
100%.
Yeah, we're real great big market.
Climate change adaptation work we're doing.
How you keeping the deer out?
Share. Maybe not. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard fishing line too. It's supposed to be really unnerving. What is
There
this
with
thing on it?
Right.
That you have some monocle.
Okay, all right, but, all right, well, I mean, it's, you know, we have. Yes.
Did you locate Kevin?
But I'm gonna just ask folks that, I want folks who are on the audio stream, I believe we are now on the stream, I apologize for the delay. This is our first semi-public meeting in over 2 years, and it's taken us a little bit of time to get going here.
Hey, Paul, you've had public meetings. In person.
I'm
meetings.
sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Let's not alarm some
In person.
people.
So, yeah, all the secret meetings.
Our first somewhat in-person meeting. It's a hybrid meeting that we've had in first one in over 2 years. And we have a quorum. We were waiting Kevin Hancock, Commissioner, to arrive because we know he's on campus. But I suppose we ought to go ahead and kick off the meeting. So, Newell Louie, chairperson, is busy with a important personal matter. He had asked Bob Checkaway with us virtually to stand in again as acting chair for the meeting. And Bob, it's my understanding that you prefer to just ask me to go through the agenda.
Yes, Paul. I think it would make more sense to have somebody who's there in the flesh try to manage things.
Okay, then I think we'll go ahead and open the meeting. We do have a quorum present. We're expecting Kevin to arrive early if they're totally lost.
Sent them to the old steam plant. I guarantee with it.
Sure. Go ahead. So normally we start off our meetings with welcome and introductions. So I would welcome the members of the public who are on the stream and the guests who are here in person. Nice to have them a long time. So, customarily, we go around the room and do introductions. So I'm going to say we start with those who are on the Zoom. Not all of them I can see right now, but Bert, I'm going to start with you. An introduction.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bert Pulchis. I'm one of the commissioners appointed by the Penobscot Nation. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day and everyone's healthy.
Bert. James?
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see everybody, albeit virtually. I'm James Cody, State Commissioner from Farmington.
Bob?
Hello, I'm Bob Checkaway. I'm one of a half dozen state-appointed commissioners, and I think I'm the one furthest to the south in Freeport. To everybody, I wish I could have joined you today, particularly John Banks. I mean no offense, but the person who's been scaring me the most lately is your Molly and Dana, who, although she's been vaccinated and boosted, came down with the COVID. And boy, she tells a good story. But I'm welcome to our tribal leadership guest and representative. Let's go, people. We have to make this an effective meeting here. We've got outsiders. Look forward to talking to you all.
Thanks, Bob. Joey?
Hi, it's Joey Barnes, represent Indian Township from Passacody Tribe.
Thanks, Joey. And Sam?
Sam Zane John, Holt Bend, Mouse Seed Indians.
Okay, and then going around the room in person. To my left, Sarah?
I'm Sarah Medina from Dixmont, and I'm state representative.
Richard?
Richard Rosen, I live in Bucksport, and I'm a state commissioner.
Karen?
Karen Ranko, representative from South Bend.
Zeke Rock McDonald,
I want to acknowledge folks that are on the Zoom as well, including Penobscot Chief Francis. I know you can't see him on the big screen, but he is on the Zoom. And Passamaquoddy Vice Chief, Indian Township, Passamaquoddy Vice Chief. Him. And I believe that Rena Newell, our representative of Passamaquoddy, has joined. Rena, can you confirm that you're out there?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I am.
And Chief Francis, I meant to ask you and Daryl if you wanted to say hi. Identify yourselves on the Zoom because we can't.
Sure. Sorry about my camera too, but it's great to see everyone, and thank you for having me today, and look forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Vice Chief.
Hey, good afternoon. It's nice to join you. I've made previous efforts to join you. I was just not comfortable with the one-way audio, but yeah, I just want to recognize for a moment the work that MITSC has done over the years. I think it's our vehicle to facilitate the Maine Indian Land Claim Settlement of 1980. I kind of question the effectiveness of this vehicle and the process, but I do appreciate your good efforts, your good work. Lewin?
Thank you, Vice Chief. And I think, Bob, we would move on to reviewing the agenda, which folks have copies of it here.
You can, if that would be helpful. It will.
Are there folks out there, do you want us to put the agenda up on the screen? On the Zoom?
We printed it out.
I mean, it is gonna kind of get in the way in terms of seeing folks. It's okay. But the beginning of the meeting, I don't think it's gonna be essential. I'm gonna suggest that we Hi there. Introduce yourself.
Yes, hi, Kevin Hancock. I'm a state commissioner from Pasco.
Have you? So I was going to suggest that we rearrange the agenda a bit. In particular, I was going to suggest that after these introductions, we move to a portion where we're going to honor John Banks, his service to MITSC for decades and decades. And then I suggest that after that, we take care of review of the minutes. I would hold off on the managing director report until later meeting, and so that after the minutes, we go to the fishing study, because we have Judd Handel with us in person, and we have Tony Sutton available on the Zoom. So any objection to proceeding in that fashion? Okay, I don't hear one. So we would move on then to recognizing John Banks and I think it's 34 years.
Who's counting?
So obviously the longest ever serving member of the House. Wanted to originally had intended to do something last fall, shortly after retired from his and left MITSC, but pandemic kept getting in the way of that. In the meantime, we had a gift prepared for John. In person at a meeting several months ago, but after waiting and waiting and waiting and not having an in-person meeting, we went ahead and presented that gift. I wanted today, John has brought the gift with him, show and tell, and I wanted to ask Bert, who was instrumental in the creation of this gift, to talk a little bit about the gift that we prepared for John. Bert, would you be willing to do that?
Yes. So, hold on a second. Let me, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello? Okay. So, when we first heard of the fact that, John, you were getting ready to, thinking about retiring from your job with the Penobscot Nation, as well as, stepping down from your long tenure as a commissioner representing the Penobscot Nation. We're at the time looking to, honor, the various commissioners that have left the commission. And I made a point, I needed to take care of you, because, not just as the other Penobscot commissioner, but as a friend and a person who has watched you do your work, whether for the Penobscot Nation, but also, here on the commission. I think about that time when you first approached me and told me that the chief and vice chief were hunting me down to come on this commission. And, as I told you then, I said, I told you I don't like dealing with politicians. And yet it was your words. Though, I value, our chief's needing to ask me to sit on this commission, Chief Francis, as well as at the time our vice chief, Billy Thompson, and I respected what they had to say. But what got me to really think and take this chance, and coming onto this commission, it was because of your words. and what you had to say and how you felt. And I knew that to be true. I've, listened to a lot of things you've done before I came on this commission. Then I got the chance to work alongside of you, representing the Penobscot Nation. And knowing what you've done in our, as the director of our Department of Natural Resources, you've done an awesome job. And, my family has felt that in so many ways. But sitting on this commission, I also have seen the things that have come about. And one of the reasons why, so many things this commission has been able to do is because of what you've done, your experience, your knowledge. And so, I volunteered to make sure I was the one taking care of getting an appropriate gift to present you, to honor you for your time. Not just on, for the commission, not just representing the Penobscot Nation, but all of the Squabanagi, all of the nations of Squabanagi. Matter of fact, Native nations across this continent. Many of them recognize who you are and the efforts that you've put forth. So sitting on this commission, you've represented this commission as a whole for so long in such a strong way and in such an honorable way. So, I know, you were really good friends with my brother Dominic. And I know you've always looked at his artwork, his clubs, not just his war clubs, but, other artwork. And so I thought it'd be appropriate to ask his son, who he taught and trained to carve those clubs as well, to carve something for you, depicting your time on this commission, as well as the work you've done for all of the Native people, but also to bring better relations between the tribes and the state. So that's what that club that my nephew Domingue Caparez had carved for you. And the feather, there's no eagle feather. First of all, the club itself, that's the gift from the commission as a whole. But the feather, that represents the love and prayers and the honor that we have for you, from my family to you, and representing the Turtle Clan. So I know there's probably more I can say, and everybody would be sleeping by then, but I know Zagam, Chief Francis had mentioned he'd like to say something as well to honor John. So I'm going to hand it over to him. Zagam?
Thank you, Bert, and thank you, everyone. And thank you for honoring John. I think it's extremely appropriate and well-deserved. I've known John most of my life, and since I was a little kid, actually, and we spend a lot of time in our family's hunting camp together and talking, and ultimately one day I end up being chief of the Penobscot Nation, and John is my director of natural resources, and I will just tell you, it seemed like, early on in my career here, John played an integral part in educating me, making me understand understand the issues that were in front of us, and also just being a great mentor. You know, he had been with the tribe for decades. And here comes this, 35-year-old kid. But he was really supportive. And again, John's been like family to me. I didn't have a lot of great, grandfather presence in my life growing up. And I thought of his dad in that way. So we just had a great relationship. And, don't get me wrong, he could be a pain in the ass at times, as all of you know. But I think that he was always coming from a place where it was about his passion, about his beliefs, and I always appreciated that. And it seemed like every time we had a kind of a moment in the tribe and tribal state relations or whatever it was, I was always with John. And I was just thinking today about a time when we chaired the National Tribal Environmental Council, 180 tribes nationally. And I remember those early meetings. I inherited that position and had no idea what I was doing. And some of the largest tribes in America, and having John there with me to be able to talk, I just look at him from the podium and he would answer the tough questions. And again, I just learned a ton from him. And I remember one time, and this is relative to MITSC, we were having a really tough time with tribal state relations. We were coming off a work group process, and a lot of things didn't pass out of committee. Nothing did, actually. And things were just going sideways. And I remember getting a call from the media, and that's when you heard, the Penobscot Nation is seceding from the state. We've had enough, all of those things. And probably a bit of an overreaction at the time from me, but a lot of emotions were coming out. But when that was happening, I was actually sitting on the side of a road in a car in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with John Banks. And I remember, just the guidance and wisdom of him. And so I can tell you, every congressional meeting we've ever been in, or any of those things together, the congressional folks would always say, "What's the mechanism?" And he was always a staunch advocate for MITSC. And, MITSC's a statutory authority. It needs to have the ability to deal with these things. And he understood that MITSC's not a tribal organization. It's an organization that is dealt the hand of dealing with a very sacred responsibility of tribal state relations, government to government relations, and trying to improve those in a way that's beneficial to both sides. And, so, you can go on and on about the Penobscot River Restoration Project, about how he mentored young people in our tribe. Today, we have a tribal director that is a young tribal member. We have 2 tribal foresters that John had an influence on, and brought people up and really believed in people's skill set, and are now running our nation's largest department, and one with very tough shoes to fill. So thank you for honoring John. John's been a tremendous influence, not only on me, but obviously on the direction of our tribe. He's certainly one of the founding fathers in the modern self-determination era. And he's going to be a tremendous citizen and an elder and mentor going forward. So thank you for that. And I look forward to hearing from others, but it's great to see John. And it's also wanted to thank you for honoring him today. Thanks.
I want to acknowledge the guests who's here, Dr. Crawl, and long time. Especially on a
Well, John, what a wonderful person to have on the commission, all your longevity. And you weren't just a person occupying a seat. You would often, whatever the issue, you were often one of the first people who was going to volunteer if the commission was going to form a subcommittee or task force, or you would have direct involvement because of deal with natural resource issues that were also your professional responsibility. That was a luxury as an executive director. Just for people who don't know, I was the executive director of the Maine Indian Tribal State Commission from September 2005 until February 2017. We did consulting work for the commission for over 2 years. That was a great resource to have you. And we might be talking about another attempt to improve tribal state relations. You can always count on John. Yeah, well, I remember 1983, or I remember 1995. Or I remember, you were a living history, which, is also really special because that's so consistent with your people, right? Oral tradition and the knowledge keepers, the Penobscot Nation, all the ancestors who do, all the generations to come. That is a way that you share and keep that knowledge. You definitely brought that to the Maine Indian Tribal State Commission. I also can remember my perhaps favorite MITSC meeting was when you helped us. We actually went to Madamascontas and actually canoed across the lake and held a meeting at a Penobscot Nation citizens camp. That I especially enjoyed, so I appreciated you helping to arrange that, the canoes, and how wonderful to get out and see some of those Penobscot Nation lands. I would encourage the commission to consider doing some more meetings like that and seeing the lands of all the tribes, but especially the MITSC waters that are under jurisdiction. I'm glad that you're enjoying retirement with Cheryl. You're getting to garden. Hope you get to do some fishing. You did a lot to help protect that resource. Hope you get to enjoy it. I know you don't see it as a resource. That's not Western. That's a relation for you, a special one. But thank you for all your service. I'm pretty safe in saying I don't think anyone is ever going to serve 34 years on the Maine Indian Tribal State Commission. That's an incredible record of service. So thank you. As a former executive director and as a citizen of the state of Maine who wants to see better tribal state relations, I know that you always tried your best to help improve that relationship.
Sarah's made a really good suggestion that I asked John and Cheryl at the end of the on the camera. And the folks did gift. And I guess I don't want to snub anyone. It's a lot of I want to open it up. Anyone else, either on the Zoom or in person.
Yeah, I'd love to. Hi, John. Good to see you. I feel a bit small at saying this because I've only known John for 3 years now. But one of the things I think I know about John is you don't have to be around him too long to know exactly who he is. He's a very consistent, transparent person, and I just wanted to say in my short time that I haven't had a bigger personal gift than the opportunity to get to know John, work with John, and see him in action. We talk a lot in our world today about the need for balance, and I think John's one of the best living examples of balance. He's super fun and he's highly focused. He's exceptionally calm and appropriately feisty. And most importantly to me, he's very, which I think this country so desperately needs, is he's very passionate and grounded in his own beliefs, and yet highly, highly collaborative. And a living example that you can be passionate about what you believe in and highly collaborative at the same time. I just think John's one of the best examples I've ever seen of what public service should be about, and he's just such a global citizen to me. He's proud of his Penobscot heritage. He's proud to be from Maine. He's proud to be an American, and he's proud to be a human. And I just got back from Pine Ridge last week, and I just think about one of their core spiritual concepts, which is the Tapye Oyasin, which translated means we're all related. And all the separation we create is not real, it's an illusion. And I just think John has known that his whole life and embodies that. And I just feel really honored to have the opportunity to know you and work with you.
Sarah?
It's hard to follow Kevin. I agree with everything he said. But I just wanted to mention that I've known John before I came on. He was pretty well known in the forestry environmental state of Maine throughout his career and well respected. I really got to know him a little bit better in 2017 together on a event called the Private Lands Partners Day, which was a national event sponsored by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, private landowners from across the country, and in Maine, the local landowners, NGOs and state agencies worked on this to bring, I can't remember how many people, 4 busloads, had out on our tours, Maine for a multi-day event to talk about ways the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the agencies, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was probably prominent, and other agencies work with landowners on collaborative efforts to manage various things on the land, whether it's trees or wildlife or whatever. So we had this multi-day event, and one of the highlights of it was to talk about the Penobscot River dam. And John was on the planning team for this in the event. He actually helped make a video that we had too. So his, as others have said, his influence goes much beyond tribes of the state of Maine.
Comments? Those here in the room are on a little hard, everyone.
I want to say.
A
Lower my
rebuttal?
mask. No, I mean, I met and started working with John in 1994. It's really hard to put into words like how much to me, actually, he probably doesn't do, but you know, and I was just talking about sort of the embodiment of our diplomacy. Really just observing John overall. You know, I mean, consistent with what other people have said, I see this as our diplomatic. Be firm in our belief, you know, articulate about the firmness of our stance, but not try to find ways to work together. That embodiment is our tradition. You know, I'm just reminded of even, you know, there was a treaty negotiation in 1717, and there was a new British governor general. And he had never been in the space of Wabanaki diplomats, and he was really floored by the definitive quality of what we were stating as Wabanaki people at that treaty negotiation. It's very consistent with previous ones. He was new, but he lost. He got very angry. He lost control. Started knocking over. There's a ceremonial space related to our treaty negotiation. He actually destroyed the ceremonial ceremonial object. They called it for the day, and actually the next day, that English governor came back. They had calmed him down, but the Penobscot diplomat who had sort of, his firmness had caused that person to there. He also refused that. We recognize that when we evoke that level of animus in someone else, when we're trying to work together, our diplomatic traditions recognize that we are also. So I think, it's hard, and just thinking about the chief's letter that closed out the vast legislative kind of context. People have asked me, like, chiefs give up, or what happened there, or what, all that sort of thing. And Don embodies that so well. You just have to observe like that, but you have to observe through the lens of our traditions of and the firmness of our engagement over hundreds and hundreds of years. Zeke and I were talking about many examples of this work that you've been continuing embodiment. And just so important, so important.
I am grateful. to have the opportunity to express our appreciation to you first. Heartfelt, sincere. Cross-cut so many. And has been identified every one of those authentic self. And that is a gift. Everyone has gifts. When you have decided, here you are, and offer them effort to struggle, greater good. Happy to. Thanks. All today.
I don't want to cut off anyone. If there's anyone who wants to jump in with comments. Not. I'm going to call him to his defense.
Touch it. Hitting that club reminded me time back when we used to go to Washington every year to negotiate our self-determination contract. One year, Eastern Region BIA Forester given him a war club retirement gift. We got into Washington late, so we didn't have time to go to our hotels and check in. Right from the airport, BIA offices, Washington. Had to carry the war club with me into contract negotiation. That made a little bit of a splash. We did pretty well that year. Also, on had said, trip up to Montes. One thing I do remember about that is had a deputy commissioner of Fish and Wildlife called Jakes. Getting ready, I'm holding it. First thing he did was drop his cell phone in the lake. I gave him hell. If you get the break. And in all seriousness, it's been a fantastic run. appreciate it. I'm not gonna talk long. I've forgotten most of a lot of things. I do remember some of the high points, one of which was working with Senator King was the governor. King. That's when MITSC was having these governors meet. Every year, the state governor would invite tribal chiefs and decide on working on buying, working on. One of the things that came out of that was the understanding of need for education. General. Of it, now. Problem. We have been, tribes in Maine, been federally recognized since the 70s, decided to develop program, governmental. Well, there hadn't been a lot of understanding tribes, state of Maine. I saw that. Been so many efforts lately, by lately I mean outreach. We're seeing the results. That's been shown. What? Well, I think MITSC can really provided it. I'm not gonna do all business. Want to leave you with question is, what does Maine want? What do we want that? People of Maine have legislature. Now we need the rest of state government to catch up. Creative branch, state government, we've all realized that colonization is over. Here, we're not going anywhere. That, what do we want? Do we want to continue down this road? Colonization? Eventually the tribes would disappear? What we want? Or do we want the tribes to remain? Be healthy. Our cultures survive. I've seen every other state in this country that heavily recognized what a tremendous benefit is recognized by many examples. Towns, surrounding towns, tribes have prospered, mostly with tribes, recognizing. I'll just leave you with 2,000. We got, every time we crossed the state line, stopped at the in and look at material, how to understand how other states. It was a little bad. Fine. We're getting there. Thank you, Bert. Thank you.
Bert,
I can't see anybody in there right now, and a little bit of the video, the audio has been choppy, but I don't have any video of the room there. I just wanted to say, John, real quick, that I wouldn't be on this commission if it wasn't for you. You knowing how much I cannot stand dealing with politicians. I mean, doing what I do, yes, I have a responsibility to stay abreast of the politics involving, our native people. But that's where I was okay. I was okay with. I've always been okay with that. But to step forth and into a seat such as this, and I do feel it is important. I do believe that we can make a difference, in regard to the relationships between the tribes and the state. If we're given the resources and the backing that we need, the tools that we need. And I think about, what Vice Chief Newell said at the beginning about the, his concerns about, the effectiveness of this body. I think that we can be very effective. It's a matter of trying to get the state to realize that we need the resources to do what we're responsible for according to statute, and at the same time take the recommendations, and a lot of those recommendations that have been made. You were one of the main people to come up with those recommendations. Yes, as a group, the commission, pulls those things together. But I've listened to what you've had to say through these years that I've been on the commission, and so, John, my being on here, I blame you. But at the same time, I'm honored the fact that, chief, vice chief, and council, and mainly you, believe that I can, can be an integral part of what's going on here, what we need to do. And so you've also helped me grow. And for those of you that think, John has retired and all, I haven't let him retire. He'll let you know that he'll probably tell you that I do call him. He tries to avoid me, but I hound him enough and he calls me back. So, just to pick his brains and get his thoughts on things to give me a better perspective on issues that we're dealing with at any particular time. So John, you've been a mentor for me on this commission in a lot of ways. And, I just want to say, Chiwaliwan for all of that. Kamash Kazomo, brother. By the way, I still have no video of the room there. I don't know what can be done.
I think we're working on it.
We're trying to figure it out.
Bye.
Bye.
At this point, we should just say something mundane, a review and approval minutes for each meeting.
I move we approve the minutes as written.
Discussion of that? None? All in favor of minutes?
Aye.
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 Hey, Paul,
Yeah.
this is Checkaway. The audio from the meeting is cutting out, and I think you just had a vote to approve the minutes, which I joined. But I think people need to speak real close to the microphone.
Well, we're not using the table microphones, we're using the central
Well,
system.
I can ask them.
You can talk louder. Does that help? Talk louder?
Yeah, that's a big improvement.
We are turning on the table microphones. Hopefully that'll be better.
Yeah, hopefully it's not some other.
Okay, I guess we just have to ask everyone to, I'm probably an offender myself, not talking strongly enough. So the next item that we want to move to on the organized agenda would be the discussion of the fishing study. While Judd is here in person and Tony is still with us, I believe. On the Zoom. So I'm gonna turn to Judd and also to Tony to just give us a brief update on the last developments with the fishing study. And then I think we need to kind of review the meeting that was held by the committee to discuss the study. So, Judd.
Thanks, Paul. Where we're at with the fishing study at this point, we've sent out a draft that's pretty much a complete draft for discussion and for suggestions and whatever to the commission members. And the last thing we sent out, well, let me back up a step. That draft had some recommendations at the end, and those were not really fleshed out when they were sent around. They were just thoughts that Tony and I had. The report is your report, the commission's report, and in particular, the recommendations need to be the commission's recommendations. Because that's the important part. So we sent around the recommendations with minor changes and with some explanatory material to sort of give them a little bit of context. That's pretty much, excuse me, what I have to present. If Tony has anything else, that would be great. Other than that, we're just ready to listen to the discussion of the draft. Any suggestions, recommendations?
Tony?
I don't have anything to add beyond that. I mean, last week we met with the subcommittee to talk about that and get some really good feedback, like, you know, making sure to emphasize Wabanaki sustenance practices and how they can be, you know, inconsistent with, you know, different policies like, you know, sharing fish or procuring sustenance for elders and things like that. So I think it's that kind of feedback, you know, that's useful, as well as looking at the recommendations, because it's just Judd and I thinking about this to give you all something to think about as well, to get, you know, your input to shape those recommendations and how you see the report can be useful, because the more perspectives we can have, the better.
So I would, I guess at this point, I would add or ask, I think Sarah and Sam, who were on the meeting of the last week, to share any thoughts they have based on their review for the meeting.
Okay, I'll start on that. I think in general, the report is excellent. I think it's very well researched, very well written. For me, being a non-native and not knowing the difference in the definition of sustenance, I thought it was very helpful in clarifying the different views and different ways of looking at it. I thought it was also an excellent history of the anadromous fishery on the rivers. And I know that at our meeting, we talked about a couple of things. One was including a few more interviews with people natives who knew a lot about the subject. And I agreed that would be fine. I was a little bit concerned that we have already been working on this for about 3 years now, and it has gone out for review previously. And I thought that the people who were interviewed and were quoted here had given a pretty consistent view of things, not the same words, not the same definitions or approaches, but when you look at it as a whole, it was fairly consistent. If it had been wide with lots of different views, I would say, yeah, we definitely need to interview more people. So at this point, I think interviewing 2 or 3 more people might just help clarify it, or maybe not clarify it, but give the Native people confidence that they were heard, they are heard and represented in this report. When we set out to do this, we specifically focused on anadromous species. And I think that we need to kind of stick with our original intent, and that's what's been done. I'm really glad, Doug, that you had the opportunity to put together some explanation of some of the specific recommendations. When I first read them, I had some questions, and this clarifies things for me. I would really like to see this group be able to rally around the specific recommendations and come up with something we could all put our names on and say we agree to this. The report itself, the context, the information, I don't think there should be any disagreement on. I think too well laid out. There may be a few edits, maybe that some people suggest, but in general, I think it's very good. I don't know if I should go the next step and say the only, I guess I will, but the only thing that really concerned me under the recommendations was listing salmon as an endangered species at the state level. I would like to find a way that we, natives, non-natives alike, the environmental organizations, the landowners, would state that we recognize that salmon is a very important species. We recognize that it is listed as endangered by the federal government. Problem I have with listing it as a state endangered species is the administrative burden that comes along with that. And I think as it is, landowners already have to deal with the federal level, and the state level just adds more administrative burden. And I fail to see how that is going to help the salmon. I think that we'd be better off to collaborate on projects like Project Share with the salmon habitat restoration and those kinds of things on a work together sort of basis, that have an artificial designation that says this is endangered, but doesn't really do anything. That's the thought that I would have, and I think that we could work together better than getting the landowner community all riled up about an extra designation. So that's my only thought. And I hate to throw out one thing I don't like, but all in all, I think there's a lot here we can agree to. But I don't know, I'm not here to go along with things. I guess I'm here to try to contribute, and that's my contribution from the landowner community. Well, they haven't read it yet, but I know their thoughts. So.
You may want to comment on that. I want to give Sam a chance to make any comments. Sam? Sam, are you out there, and do you have any comments on the report and the meeting?
Oops, I was talking, never got on mute. Atlantic salmon just across the border here from our tribe, about 3 miles, are listed by the Canadian government as a species at risk, which would be the American or Canadian equivalent of endangered species. And with their listing, that opened up so much more funding for the First Nations in Canada and other government agencies, the Canadian Rivers Institute, to start more projects on helping out salmon. And also, since the salmon's not listed over here, our department has kind of taken on projects that at face value are for a certain species, but benefit the whole benefit salmon also, well, benefit the entire environment. But I believe being listed by the state would open up more funding opportunities for other agencies. There's quite a few smaller agencies like the Atlantic Salmon Federation stuff, and other ones that would benefit from it being listed and it being given more prominent priority here in Maine.
My concern about listing is that just listing it alone doesn't do much. But if there's a possibility that it could bring this funding or this study or whatever, I think we need to find that out and put that either in the report or as a side sheet, so that when we make this recommendation to the public in general and say we think it should be listed by the state, we could say because it'll do this, it'll do this, it'll do this. Maybe if we show that it will do a lot of good things, there will be less resistance to it. But to just list it, I don't think that's helpful in getting along in the whole scheme of things. But that's a good point, Sam.
Bert has a comment?
Yeah, I actually think that it'd be, the best opportunity for the tribes as well as the state when it comes to listing it. I believe that, listing it on the state level, it's already a federal list, it's already on the list on the federal side. What makes it so hard to expect the state, to list that and take a responsibility? It's to me, the way I look at it is, part of the problem that we have is because of the fact that the state hasn't taken it seriously, as it should have. And so, listing it, dealing with what you refer to as an additional burden, this burden wouldn't be, even in question if this was listed in the first place on the state, if they took it seriously. So I think that, I've read over these recommendations and, the informational stuff, parts that coincide with those recommendations. And I think that overall they're pretty good. I don't have a problem with any of them personally, but I really think that yes, we should push to get the state to list it. It should coincide at the very least with the federal.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'd be curious to know what people think about the other recommendations in the report in general. Sam and I were at the subcommittee meeting, and so we gave our thoughts, but I'm pretty sure you've all read this, and I'd like to know what some of the other thoughts are.
Is it involved that salmon question? Just want to list it on the endangered species on the state level with the added explanation of what we benefit from doing that?
I don't know that we resolved it, but I think we gave Judd some ideas on, how he might flesh it out a little bit. I don't know if we can resolve it today, but
Well,
sounds like a good idea.
yeah, I guess that's up to all of you collectively. I guess I wasn't anticipating voting on specific pieces of the report. John, I guess it's up to you. The comments that have been made, are they useful to you?
They are helpful. This is a recommendation. That was made. I'm aware of, there's some controversy about this. I'm aware of some of the, I'm aware of the arguments on both sides. I hadn't quite appreciated the private land feature, what they might have to do with this. It was made a recommendation, the list of recommendations, both for a major policy statement, because it is a priority statement. In that way, it's in line with. And also, frankly, from the report, I thought it was appropriate because it's in fact true. The salmon survivability serious. And what we do with salmon and where that goes. Maybe the salmon will follow the reintroduction. All part of this, part and parcel. that's why we included it. And I think the idea of putting in researching.
I'm with Sarah on that topic. I really want to see in detail what benefits for certain staff and for it to be listed at the state level. And I would think those benefits would be substantial. I'm leery of a double listing here too. I'm also, that would be number one. Number two, I'm leery of putting something in this document that'll just be a dead on arrival distraction. I'd also be curious if you think there's any chance that would fly at the state level. What would it take for it to get listed? Who would have to sign off on that? And if the benefit would need to be substantial, and to me the probability would need to be reasonable. Or otherwise, I would worry that it's could be a distraction, a waste, an unnecessary distraction if it's not actually gonna have a high likelihood of happening and making a difference.
Darren?
Yeah, I'm a little. It's not a controversial notion. All the environmental. I'm not sure what listings for endangered species is actually the norm. So I just say that I would support it. I mean, there is always here to this work, but if you look around in terms of action, state listings allow for more protection of habitat. So that's the thing. And maybe that impacts, at times the landowners, but I think it's totally up to the department that parameters of the information. So, I mean, I would support that, but just looking at the recommendations, I really appreciate that you guys identified why the recommendations, like that you popped them out, because I think that is the sort of takeaway. It's a really important takeaway from the report that, the implication, especially around indigenous knowledge and around sustenance, I think, really requires some attention. I really appreciate it. Some of us have been, as you know, working on this for decades to protect. So I think the recommendation is solid. None of it, in my opinion, none of it would be a surprise to the extent that listing, there's obviously been resistance. It's not been listed so far. Like, and I was just looking up how many times, these environmental groups and a lot of them have called for this listing over the years. And, it pops up 2014, 2017, 2020. This isn't a new idea, nor is it a radical idea. I think there is resistance to it. But you have former commissioners of, the directors of they're supporting. I don't see it as a dead on arrival thing. I think it is something that's I think exploring that rationale for. Sorry, I couldn't make the.
Mr. Chairman,
This is very important. This is a very important issue for me.
Yes, in the room there, this sounds like one of the best discussions we've had in a while, but I'm only getting about 2/3 of it. All I can suggest is ask people to be sure they're speaking close to the mic. And Paul, you may not notice if you're not looking at the Zoom screen, Sam has his digital hand up.
Yeah, we can't see anyone on the big screen without their vid camera on. So maybe if someone wants to speak, if you could turn your camera on just long enough, or otherwise, yeah, I'm not, maybe I.
Okay, go ahead, Sam.
I just can say the state and the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife are pretty aware of the endangered. So I think it wouldn't. I don't think it would bring up the issue or catch anybody off guard or something like that, because we worked with the various state agencies that would be involved and 99% of the time we seem to share a consensus on what needs to be done, and so I think and I also noticed they are becoming more open to it, working with tribes. And so I think, as Darren was saying, it's been brought up a lot more times, but I think it's getting closer and closer to being seriously considered.
I don't argue that salmon are in trouble. And I respect the federal designation. But there are efforts going on. There's an effort that's spearheaded by the Nature Conservancy, working with all of the landowners who identify impediments to fish passage and rebuilding culverts and bridges, and all of the major landowners are trying to upgrade all their crossings in order to identify, and to enhance fish migration and habitat. And it's not all happening at one time. It's as bridges are being rebuilt or as extra money is available, this is ongoing. And it's a volunteer effort on the part of landowners. And it's working very well. All I'm saying is I think there could be more efforts like that if there are issues that are identified that are affecting salmon habitat and the landowners know about them. Most landowners are fishermen too, and most landowners look at the bigger picture, not just growing trees, and they would be willing to cooperate. When you have a law that says it's endangered, that means that the various state agencies, if you're going to be harvesting timber, building a bridge, making a road, whatever, the various state agencies all have to review things. And it's not so much that the recommendations are bad, it's that it often takes 3 or 4 or 5 months to get the permits. And that's what I'm objecting to. I'm objecting to the extra administrative hassle that goes along with that. So I think we would be far better off to identify the issues and say to the landowners, these are the issues we have. Now let's work together on how we might change some things. The other thing that in Washington County, there's that program, Salmon Habitat, something, it's SHARE, SHARE. And, I think these volunteer or cooperative arrangements have worked far better to create better habitat than a regulation has in general. The same thing's going on with vernal pools now. Landowners are starting to recognize what they are. They're putting the appropriate barriers around when they harvest, and different things are going on. I have a couple of vernal pools on my land, and when I harvested last year, we did it right. But if the state had said it's a zone vernal pool, you got to get a permit, it would have been a hassle that was unnecessary. that's my take on it. It's not that I don't believe salmon are endangered. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Bert wants to go.
Bert.
You know, the way I look at it, you know, just let's be honest about this, you know, but it seems like, you know, the push by the state, you know, many of the state is basically coming from industry. You know, they put the industry ahead of the health and well-being of the citizens of the state of Maine. That includes the tribes. That's why, you know, the tribes have been pushing so hard in trying to clean up the environment, trying to do everything we can to make things healthy, because it doesn't just benefit us, it benefits all people. It benefits the various wildlife, which, you know, is important to the tribal people. So, you know, it's not that we want to burden, you know, I understand, you know, landowners, yeah, some of them, a lot of them, as you said, are also fishermen. But the thing is look at the situation that our rivers, you know, our various waterways are in right now. You know, the thing is as long as the state doesn't take us seriously and put this on the endangered species list, or, you know, this and maybe other fish, and, you know, basically it's saying, okay, we're gonna just rely on things being done voluntarily, and that's good. Things should be done voluntarily as well, but the state has a responsibility. The state has a responsibility to all of the citizens, not just the industries that exist here in the state of Maine, but all of the citizens. And, you know, so what happens? You know, right now, we still have the various industries putting, you know, poisons into the water. You know, yeah, you know, we need to take care of the stuff, you know, the structures in and around the waterways. But we also need, you know, to limit more so the toxins that are going into the ground as well as into the water. Because if it's going in the ground, a lot of times it's going in the water as well. And what happens? These fish can't survive with it. So what's the problem with having this, you know, requiring the state or asking the state to go right along with the federal? I think the people, you know, overall, the full citizenship of Maine would benefit from that. Might put a burden on industry, but you know what? It's the citizens that should come first.
Yeah, just an example. I mean, look, I'm a scholar. I'm evidence-based. I'm just, you know, the state listings help habitat protection. That's not even up for debate. What I would say that an example that from Zeke and Sam's tribe along the MITSC, I'll just give you an example because I think we're more driven by narrative than we are driven by data in this group, in both groups. The MITSC, you know, EPA funded this amazing program led by the Holton Band of Maliseets for starting in around the year 2000. Started actually a little bit before that. It had to do with a non-point source pollution on the MITSC, which, if anyone knows anything about the MITSC, is heavily, there's lots of algae bloom. There's a lot of nitrogen sources, and there's a lot of runoff from farms. So EPA, the Holton Band of Maliseets, they funded a program to pay landowners to have setbacks, you know, from the stream, from the Meductic. And, you know, when the EPA was paying those landowners to do best practices along stream maintenance, they did it. When they stopped paying them, they got rid of all those setbacks, and then they just started polluting. So the volunteerism piece, I know there are examples of it, but in evidence, you know, when landowners are not fully on board with it, in the Meductic is a perfect example of it. They don't do volunteerism when they see any profit. So I think I do think identifying, when you ask for a listing, identifying ways to support landowners to comply, and I think us thinking about that in a really good way is a great process. But I'm just going to say that evidence of how this actually works this doesn't support the volunteer approach. But it's how much do you value salmon? I think you know, compared to the individual landowner's decisions to, you know, my little runoff, it doesn't create the problem, but I'm one of hundreds of people along this river. And that's why we have regulatory infrastrucures at all, right? It's because it's a tragedy of the commons unless we actually have a regulator. So yeah, I mean, we're not going to solve this today because it's the tragedy of the commons has been debated for, you know, 180 years. But I would just say that it's a really, it's not a radical idea. I think that's a really support this, and it wouldn't put this report as an outlier in any of the kinds of reports that are being used by any.
John?
One little point, Sarah jogged in my mind something that crossed my mind as I was writing the report. One recommendation, additional recommendation, could have been that the state pony up some money for the connectivity process, because that is a really important piece in terms of extending the fish spawning habitat. And as far as I can understand it, right now, that is proceeding with minimal resources. State group that's looking at connectivity doesn't have much in the way of resources. There is a lot of volunteer effort. Published guidelines and recommendations for the stream process. Yeah, a lot of it's left up to the people who are logging or whatever they're doing.
Comment on that. I think that's a great idea, Judd. I think it would be particularly helpful to municipalities and maybe land trusts and organizations like that to have money available for stream crossing upgrades. I think the major landowners have it pretty well under control in their own budgets. But when you're talking about a stream that goes through town and woods and whatever, it'd be really great if municipalities could have money available for crossing upgrades.
Well, Kevin.
I'm gonna make this more complicated. This is the last thing we need. This conversation to me is an example of a much bigger topic for me, which is what I don't like about the MITSC charter. MITSC charter to me focuses every question on what can government do. Every question gets focused on what can government do, and not to say that's not important, but I'm just thinking how much fun it would be to have a discussion about all the good that could be done for salmon without any involvement from anybody in government. And I just really think on every topic where the solutions are holistic, our charter limits our focus to what is probably on many topics, the least effective way to create change, not the most effective. So I just wanted to make that point. And then second, at some point later or some other meeting, I do have a question about substance, but I know we're not there right this time.
Can I add a point to this?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sam, go ahead.
I just wanted to say on the idea of a landowner buy-in. We have, it's probably, our river runs probably about 80% ag fields up where we're at, and so we're in pretty constant contact with the landowners and the farmers of that, and the farmers are being even open to projects not related to the river that would affect more of their own planting land rather than just the water, like the majority of salmon projects would be in projects involving riparian buffers and all that. We've never had really any negative kind of pushback from them, and it's not, and we're there. These projects would certainly affect their bottom line a little bit, but it seems to be pretty commonly known that one thing benefits the other, which benefits the other, and to Kevin's point, our tribe specifically is doing a lot. We're doing as much as we possibly can, but we seem to be, some of our efforts seem to be hamstrung by the fact that the state is not listed, or it's not listed by the state, in that we could get assistance, and the state would be, or the department, state agencies would be willing to help us, but their bylaws or whatever they review to choose projects, the at-risk species that are listed are given a higher priority. So putting the issue on the state, to have the state recognize it. We've done everything we possibly could to help them without the state, and we're not really getting anywhere. So I think having the state listed is the utmost important issue at hand here.
Bert?
Yeah, and Kevin, I appreciate what you had to say there. But the thing is that I see the problem is, and I understand, we shouldn't have to, we really shouldn't have to go to the government, whether state or federal. But the fact of the matter is, the situation as it is, even with the landowners, say all of the landowners agree, and they volunteer their time to do what they can possibly do to make things safer, and allow, bring our fish and wildlife back up to health. But the thing is you still have, certain industries that dump their stuff, basically in the waters, and they give them a certain percentage of, that they can dump, that, someone somehow determined that it's a safer amount than what they were doing. But I think a lot of that, they pay for one big accident, yeah, they might have to pay a fine or whatever it is, but if they just hold all of it back, and all of a sudden, boom, they release it. Oh, it's an accident. Okay, we'll pay the one fine. But the thing is, that does nothing. That does nothing for the fish and wildlife. And in this case, I know the Penobscot Nation was instrumental in bringing back what salmon we had for a while. Now we're back to, we can't, you know, we don't get that, the salmon coming in as they were for a little while. And, personally, I miss being able to eat that salmon. I miss being able to fish for them, and so do a lot of other people. And I'm just speaking on the tribal side, but I'm sure there's a lot of non-native people within the state, other citizens of the state that would love to. But it comes down to the fact that we need to bring them back in numbers that are healthy. And in order to do that, we're not asking the state to come up with a bunch of money. If from my understanding anyway, if they do list it, that there's a good possibility that they can get some additional funding to help with the efforts to restore the salmon and other species as well. Clean this place up, clean our rivers up, clean our waterways up. But like I said, I keep I don't like to just keep on pointing fingers, but I have no choice. The problems that we have are more with the industries that leach their stuff into the rivers, into the waterways, into the groundwater. And we've seen, if they're not held accountable, if there's nothing on the state laws that prevent them from doing stuff, then they're going to keep on doing it. But if the state goes ahead and lists it on the state's endangered species list, then maybe something can get done. Why should we even have to ask for that? It should have been done when the federal has it on the list. Well, the states should have it on the list as well. The state is a part of the United States, right?
At this point, I'm wondering how you all collectively want to proceed. First of all, we've only talked about the one piece. Is there a consensus with the rest of them?
Well, in my opinion, the two issues that are likely to be the most controversial are this one and sustenance. And I thought sustenance was dealt with very well in the report. I thought the way that it was defined and the native people spoke about their relationship to the land and the natural world and what sustenance meant, even though it's not in either Wabanaki or I don't remember who has the dictionaries, but anyway, I thought it was handled pretty well. It did not come to a conclusion that one definition should be the dominant definition, because I think the next step is for this report to get out, and it's going to take some legislative work or something. This group is not going to be able to say this is how sustenance ought to be looked at by the state. So I'd like to kind of get into that topic at the risk of another long discussion, but I'd like to know what Kevin's question is and see what others think about the way sustenance was handled at our committee meeting. One of the points that Sandra made was that it ought to be said right up front that there's a definite difference in how people view sustenance. That she was afraid that if it wasn't right up front, some people, particularly the Native Americans, would not want to read it further. So I don't know how Judd was going to handle, and Tony, we're going to handle that, but I think I felt it was laid out in pretty good form. but I'm sensitive to her thought that it ought to be maybe highlighted a little more right in the beginning in order to get people to read the whole document. And I'm not the scholar or the author, so I will leave that to these two, but I would like to talk about sustenance. Thanks.
Yeah, I had a few questions. First was, isn't sustenance really the big gorilla in the room at 80% of the topic, or not? I have a feeling it has been, but two questions. First, this is probably spelled right out in the report, so forgive me, but just in summary, does the state have a working legal definition of sustenance that we think is a meaningful detriment to the tribes?
No, the state doesn't have a definition.
Right, the state has a definition for like marine organism. It does not have definition for the purpose we're looking at. The problem is to try to define it might end up being a legal issue, and then you're not really looking at the substance of the discussion on either side. Wrote it down. So I think it's one of the really large gaps between the state and between starting from the just how view that. And I tried to lay a lot of that out in the report. That's one of the purposes of the report. Not this would take a specific definition, discussed and understood at a much greater level. Than it has been. And I agree. I haven't gone back to try to redraft it. I'm putting something in the beginning, introductory part of the report about this. I don't have to put in that much to read into what part about
that. Thank you for that. And my second question is really short, my own not knowing. So forgive me, but is the sustenance question primarily today a theoretical question or a practical question? To numbers and data, I've been curious how many tribal members today or families feel like they're constrained in a meaningful way by the status quo.
I'm going to respond to that, although I'm not really the right person to respond to it. When you talk about sustenance, first of all, we're not just talking about fish, all kinds of things. Part of the sustenance. There are many people who practice to any greater or lesser degree those practices. Game, fish. And the other point I would make, the fact that not that many people fish and eat fish doesn't mean that there is essentially an economic up demand that can't be fulfilled because the fish are wasted. And the big ifs, if fish were to come back in the way anywhere near see that become
The second point, I think that, it's a cultural thing as much as a practical thing, definition of sustenance. And also, about your first comment. Oh, yeah, I wanted to say that the way this is written with the explanation of the differences, how natives and non-natives use sustenance, I think is very helpful, because instead of saying to me, this is the Wabanaki view and this is what you ought to adopt, I now understand what that Wabanaki view is. Somebody's not just telling me what it is. I understand it. And so if I were a legislator or somebody that's looking at how to define this, you know, there's a point, it's all laid out. These are the facts. Both sides. Now I understand it and I can make a decision. And if it were me looking at it, I would try to come to some agreement that of sustenance that opens the door wider for the Wabanaki community, but doesn't just throw the thing open. So that's just my view of it. But I really like the fact that everybody now will have the information in order to make logical conclusions and discussion.
I appreciate that. That was purpose.
Yeah, it's obvious you put a lot of time into it, and I think it was well done.
Just, I wanted to say, in, you know, in, the main implementing act of Section 7, right? That, where sustenance is mentioned, and it actually has to do with the work of the commission. So, I mean, I actually think that, you know, the contemplation of defining sustenance here in the commission, I think, would be, we are tasked with it indirectly. So I would just encourage people to reread that. We are on this commission. And I think that's why I think this is a critical, you know, Kevin mentioned the, whatever, the gorilla, whatever that kind of phrase is. So I do think that that's a really important, you know, I think the report comes short of asking the commission to actually define it, for the reasons you lay out. But also, as you know, we defined it in the report that I co-authored in 2009, we defined it as a diet in the contact period, given the calorie needs of people living in that lifestyle. So we define sustenance in a very specific scientific way, based upon caloric intake, energy production. You know, we did scientific. So, but there are a bunch of other folk definitions out there and notions of what I think, you know, that would be a lot for the commission to take in. But I would just encourage people, as we think about that term, it is in the commission's work, at least it says something about it in 6207.
Yeah, and I would just comment on that is the genesis for this report.
Yeah, I know.
The language in 6207. That's why it's important. Bert.
Uh-oh, it's him again. Yeah, so, you know, my understanding of what the word now is that's used as sustenance, as it states, we had no word for that, and you know, I think that did a really a good job on this, you know, on this recommendation and the explanation. But the thing is too is yeah, what the government, I guess in this case, the state government, you know, they have a tendency to use the term sustenance. They have two different things. You have sustenance and you have commerce, you know, commercial. Okay. You know, when we're talking about fishing or hunting, you know, you have sustenance and you have commercial. Okay. But to us, we had no such word. What we did was we utilized the resources available to sustain ourselves as well as our families and other, you know, our people as a whole. And so, you know, what did that involve? That involved, you know, going out, we go hunting, we go fishing, whatever, we go gathering, and in turn, we turn around and, you know, someone else has a need. We use trade, which trade is what? A form of commerce, right? We didn't call it that. We didn't see it as that. It's just that we had the ability to, you know, get something. We had a little more abundance. Somebody else had some things that would help us out, you know, and feed us, and, you know, whatever the case may be. We share, you know, back and forth. Now the non-native governments, they refer to that as a commercial. But we didn't see it as that. You know, we saw it as being able to sustain ourselves, you know, in you know, not just feeding ourselves, but it created, you know, a situation where we also had other things that come into play where, you know, just to be able to live and survive. So sustenance, I don't know if there's really a way to define, you know, that anyone can define sustenance in a way that our people would view it. You know, it's just it's a part of life. You know, and to take away, to limit that, you know, limits our ability to survive. We're forced to, you know, go other routes. You know, sure. Now, you know, it kind of goes back to the fish thing. You know, that we can't eat certain types of fish right anymore. Why? Because of the toxin that's in them. And so what we wind up doing, we, you know, find a way to, normally we would have a way to change that over, you know, where okay, we make a little bit of money off of something, and then we can go get something else that we can actually ingest and take care of ourselves that way. But that's what we're forced to do now. So really, I think dividing it between, you know, dividing things up between, you know, what we do for fishing, trying to define whether it's sustenance or commercial, that needs to go out the door, because it's one and the same to us. What, you know, what you consider commercial, it allows us to make a little bit of money to go and buy stuff that we can actually feed ourselves with, that might be safe. So I don't know, you know, but Judd, I think you did a good job. And I thank you for your work. And, you know, to the rest of the committee, that I missed the meeting, and I apologize. You know, I was in the middle of getting ready for travel, and I just kind of totally spaced it out. Otherwise, I'd have been on that meeting as well.
Yeah, so Bert, to add to that, I guess for the sake of information, Canada has approached this same question on a federal level in their court system. They expanded that definition to more than just sustenance, like, you know, Marshall decision, moderate livelihood, which, you know, was interpreted to include commercial fishing products, you know, violence between fishermen. But, you know, as far as I'm concerned, when we think about, you know, the direction to eventually reach, that is something of a goal, and that we shouldn't be scared to define this broadly now. I mean, it's baby steps in the right direction of what justice would necessitate. So, yeah.
Adding something to that. Oh, go ahead, Z.
That's it.
Oh, I'll just say, the idea that defining indigenous sustenance fishing rights, I think is sort of a non-issue because during the lawsuit with the Penobscot and Mounties against the state of Maine for the water rights, I interviewed elders to gain information for that case about their sustenance fishing uses, and we had come up with a list of questions based on what the state would consider sustenance fishing, and obviously it's a way less of a standard than what Native Americans would consider. So I think the idea that that wording of the recommendation would be is either unclear or needs to be fleshed out more is sort of like a non-starter, since we already fall under what the state would consider sustenance fishing.
This topic's fascinating to me. I know we can't go on all day, but it's right to the heart of so many issues. Like in the case of salmon, well, whose fish are they? Whose fish are they? And where do you land on that? And it's tough to land anywhere, but they're everybody's fish. They're everybody's fish. But backing up from that to kind of what I was thinking while Zeke was talking, I do feel like we often get it backwards, meaning Maine does, or states do, or the country does. I personally would be in favor of the widest possible latitude on sustenance in favor of the tribes. I just play that, pretend if I was governor or in control of the legislature. I would say to the tribes, you define this in a way that's going to work great for you. And then, to me, the burden would be on the state to prove or come back and explain why that would be meaningfully detrimental to others. So when I wake up on this subject, I'm pro sustenance. But the biggest thing where I keep landing is what can be done on any topic practical to meaningfully improve the lives of citizens in tribal communities. And the question I keep coming back to on this is, even if we took the tribes' preferred definition of sustenance and enacted it, would it have a meaningful impact on the lives of lots of people within tribal communities? That's the where it would get me. If the answer was yes, it would have a meaningful, real impact with very little consequential damage to non-tribal Mainers. The answer to me would always be yes, of course. To me, I'd start with their wanting to be latitude, is what I'm trying to say, broad latitude. But when I get practical, I then would want to make sure that latitude was more than theoretical or historical, was going to translate into significant modern day practical benefit.
Tony?
It will. Oh, never mind. I was say, oh, Bert, go ahead, Bert.
Me?
Oh, I thought you were going to say something. I'll just follow up if you're not, but go ahead. I know. Yeah, if you follow up that, this seems to be like a misconception that whatever recommendations or whatever regulations on anything related to this issue would be enacted, that it would negatively affect the Maine population in general, whereas we can't hoard fish, and by the state's definition, the Atlantic salmon are the state of Maine's when they cross the border. And so the idea that there's going to be a negative impact to the general Maine population by whatever restrictions or whatever would come with this recommendation being submitted, there's just there's no selfishness to our views on wanting to impose that definition of sustenance on the state, because what benefits us benefits everybody else, and I don't think that is a big enough issue to cancel out us submitting these recommendations.
So just to be clear, I want to make sure I was understood. That's what I was saying. Anything that was of meaningful benefit to the tribes and of no consequence to the rest of the state would be an automatic yes.
I think if Tony has anything to add about just practical ways that tribal lifestyles would be benefited, in response to Kevin's question.
I think, well, let's see where to start. I got to go back to the original question. I guess I would use an example, like right now, at least with clamors, the biggest conversation is around access to intertidal zones, so that way they can go clamming. And the reason why I like using clamming as one, because one, I love them and I work with them, but they're also relatively low in pollution. And if there's one thing we learned from this study, that a lot of the fish in rivers have tons of pollution in them. And this represents a species that's consistent with our diet that has relatively little pollution in it. And the interesting part about access in those conversations, as it's not being defined as access for Wabanaki people, it's being defined as access to the people who currently have the closest proximity to that. So in terms of like modern day practical benefit, I think broadening that definition of sustenance to include that. I mean, most of the Wabanaki nations in the state of Maine don't have adequate access to saltwater fisheries. That would have a tremendous benefit in terms of alleviating the amounts of sustenance we're getting from pollution-free sources or lower pollution-free sources. But back to the report, I think the biggest challenge, at least with this one, was the legislative mandates that require us to focus on freshwater sustenance, which is reflected in the interviews and the research we did. I think it would be a good recommendation to, and I think it's stated this way in the report, it's not the intention to create a definition, but to open this broader understanding that sustenance is more complex and it should be more fully fleshed out, because we can't define sustenance just for fresh water. It has to include saltwater and land-based and all those other species associated with it.
Paul, you got a couple of hands up, Bert and Joe Barnes.
I think Joey was first.
Yep.
Go ahead, Joe.
Hi, thank you. I'd like to circle back around to what Bert said earlier, and Tony just kind of keyed on it. To me, sustenance isn't about whether you fish or hunt or whatever. I think of my grandmother, that the only way she could provide sustenance for her family was to make baskets out of ash trees and sweetgrass. She did it till the day she died. And we're getting pigeonholed into something that I think that is too narrow. And I like the idea of expanding it. And it isn't just a freshwater issue. It's a really touchy subject to us when you start talking that. And when you hear the definition from the state, I've been around the the eland issue for a long time. And when you listen to marine resource people talk, it makes you sick because that's not how we were raised. That's not how we provided for our family. And I guess that's my point, is to go by what the state wants us to go by, I think is just wrong. I don't agree with it. That's enough out of me. Thanks.
Bert?
Yeah, so you know, and thanks for that, Tony and Joey. You know, years ago, you know, I think we had a discussion. I was there with right there at Marine Resources and all during this when all this Elver stuff, you know, came about, and in turn we wound up being limited on the quotas. So one of the things, you know, I'm speaking up, you know, for the Penobscot Nation is that, you know, when it comes down to the Settlement Act, again, you know, nothing. There was not, there was nothing ever stated, you know, in any of our agreements, our treaties, or even in the Settlement Act, nothing regarding the saltwater fisheries. And the Penobscot Nation also harvested traditionally in the ocean, off of the islands, in the ocean, all along the coast. You know, same right alongside, you know, with the Passamaquoddies as well. You know, so you know, to limit us, you know, even on the saltwater fishing, because, you know, like Tony mentioned, you know, you know, sustenance doesn't just limit it to the freshwater or inlands. We were in the ocean harvesting clams, lobster, whatever it may be, you know, porpoise, and so, you know, to draw that line and to keep on limiting us in an area that really nobody has the right to limit us, because we have retained our rights to fish in the ocean. You know, now here we are with, you know, at a point trying to, you know, where the term sustenance has been imposed according to what in the English language by the state of Maine, or in some cases even by the federal government. You know, there is no such word for us. We lived according to what was available to us. We hunted, we fished, we gathered, whether, you know, we harvested. This was all part of it. We even shared back, just like I said earlier, what you would consider commercial. It was just a way that we had to utilize in order to have access to other things. But, you know, when it comes down to it, you know, like, you know, the mention on the, as far as the salmon goes, you know, we've never taken more than what we've needed. That's how we're taught. So, you know, regardless of you know, how the state or municipalities or the non-native population wants to see it, we're not the body of people who are creating the problems, you know, when it comes to having access. But we do need access. We need access to those clam flats. We need access to the, you know, the various places to harvest what we need to sustain ourselves, to be able to feed, and what, you know, not just ourselves, because we don't only take care of ourselves, we take care of others. Just for instance, you know, when I go hunting, I go out and hunt. Does that mean just stay with my particular family? No. We find other members who may need help to feed themselves. And it doesn't even mean not our tribal members. We find, you know, my family, and I know a lot of other families that do this. We find out that people then in the non-native population who are having a hard time, we bring them food as well. You see, and it's not meant to glorify ourselves. It's because, you know, it's living up to a responsibility that we inherently have. We take care of the land. We take care of Chwabanagig. And I think I've said it before that, you know, Chwabanagig is not just the people. It's the land, the water, the air, every resource within our territories. That includes the people who moved in. We take care of them as well. Leland.
Well, I'm feeling the need to somehow bring this close point. To know the will of the commissioners. How you want to see here. This has been a really full conversation. I'm hopeful. But what is the intention at this point?
I think a couple things need to be done. If there are more interviews to be done, Tony, I don't know if you have 2 or 3 people in mind for interviews, but that would have to be done. I think that Tony and Judd, you can take the comments that you heard from this group and from the committee a few days ago and incorporate what you can or what you feel needs to be incorporated. And then I think it ought to come back out to everybody with a request that we all review it thoroughly, and then we discuss it at the next meeting. If those interviews can be incorporated in time, and I'm not sure how you feel about interviewing more people. That was a recommendation by a few people on the committee meeting, but I don't know if it's needs to be done or unanimous or whatever, but I guess that would be the next thing. Do we need more interviews?
Tony and I haven't really talked about it. We go with that. I'd like to talk.
Okay, well, one thought I had was, if you maybe just had a brief conversation with those 2 or 3 people that were suggested as interviewees, and maybe you could send them the document and say, ask them if they have anything materially different or new or whatever to add to the document, if they see it differently, or have the people that have been interviewed so far represented the community well. I don't want to say don't take the time to interview people if it wouldn't add the report, but if you already have a report that pretty well reflects community views as a whole, then I would say after 3 years of doing this and talking with people, maybe it's time to pull things together and move on with it. And I recognize that some people were not involved at the very beginning, but you've been bringing this to our meetings often enough and sending out drafts often enough that those of us that weren't here 3 years ago should feel pretty comfortable knowing where we are today. I do.
And also maybe writing out the implications of the list.
Right, yeah, I mean, that's part of what we talked about today, yeah.
I like that.
Tony, feel you've got enough feedback here to take that next step?
Yeah.
We don't want to let you go.
Yeah.
Well, anybody else have anything on that, or we are going to move on to another agenda item with that understanding? Okay.
Oh. He's a great guy. What is coming on my road? I watch log trucks every day bringing his wood out.
So the next agenda item on the reorganized agenda would be a legislative update. Summary of the legislative session and travel state bills. And the short summary is, I think probably everybody knows that there were two substantial tribal state bills that have been enacted. LD 585, bill that the governor's office brought forward. It established that tribes would have the online sports betting, and it also created certain tax. It altered the tax structure in some ways that is similar in some ways. For activities on the reservation. And it, for the first time, put in statute a tribals that there would be a formal state consultation. That's been a matter of executive orders.
We're only getting a few words at a time, Paul. I'm not hearing everything.
That's an actual
So I was going, if I don't know, is Rena still on the Zoom?
No.
Okay. And the other bill I was going to mention was, the bill that Rena had brought forward originally, LD 906, which is, the bill involving the water at Sabayak, which passed, it was enacted with one modification. The governor had asked that it be clarified that tribal regulatory authority would not extend beyond the tribal territory. And I believe that was the final change that was made, and then that was enacted. And as I think everybody knows, the big bill LD 1626 was not enacted. The chiefs addressed that in a group letter a week or two ago. And that's the quick summary, but I guess at this point I would invite the commissioners, and particularly those who served on the legislative / policy committee, if they have any thoughts they want to share about the legislative session and what's come out of it. Bert.
Yeah, when before you got the mic closer to you, you were talking about something, and I think we only got like a word or two in. As far as you mentioned one bill, and then you said something about it, and then you said something else, so I didn't catch all that.
Well, the first bill I mentioned was LD 585, which was the bill that the governor's office brought forward, and that was enacted. That's the bill that established the authority of the tribes to conduct online sports betting, made some changes in the tax structure for activities on the reservations that in some ways is similar to what exists elsewhere in Indian country. And it, for the first time, put in statute that there will be a formal tribal state consultation process. So that was the first statute that I talked about. And I guess I should add that the LD 585, the tribal state consultation piece does, there is some role for MITSC included in that statute, although it is far more limited in terms of the actual language of that statute, than what would have been proposed as part of LD 1626, because LD 1626 had essentially incorporated a number of things that have been carried forward from the legislative proposals in the prior session, including LD 2118, which had a lot of involvement for MITSC. So most of that language was not included in LD 585. So having said that, I guess I would again invite the members of that committee to make any comments they wanted to make. Yeah, Bob.
Yes, thank you. There was a bill sponsored by Ben Collings, which ended in a resolution that MITSC study and report to them by the end of the calendar year. Basically, the assembling of an inventory of sacred lands and waters owned by the state that the tribes might either want greater access to or transfers to. I don't think we've formed any kind of a group on that, the legislature just having adjourned. I think the next step is somebody has to get together with Representative Collings and take over whatever portfolio he's already developed on the process. I know he and Rena had talked. Molly and Dana knew what was involved, but the project didn't get quite finished enough by the time it got to the legislature. So that's still, if it's not on their table, it's on ours.
I guess I would need a clarification on that. My understanding, that's LD 1907. It didn't go forward. My understanding is.
Actually, it resulted in some kind of a decree that I think obliges us to report by the end of the calendar year. I don't have it handy, and I may have misread it, but I'll get a copy to you if that's what happened.
Yeah, I would definitely need a clarification on that, because it had been my understanding that the bill was amended to provide for MITSC to do that, but I was under the impression that it had not moved forward then.
Oh, well, I think we left it informally, at least, that somebody would get back with Ben Collings and try to put some flesh on the outline.
Yeah, that was my understanding, is that the issue for MITSC would be whether we follow up on that, and because that's a legitimate issue for MITSC to look at, if there's a desire for us to do it, whether there's a bill or not. I guess my view would be, it's within the purview of MITSC. If the state and the tribes, want MITSC to work on that, I don't think we need I don't think we necessarily need legislation.
Yeah, not all good ideas require an act of the legislature.
So I think I take from it that it would still be, it's basically an agenda item for MITSC at this point to talk about that.
Yeah, well, let's keep it on our old business now, and I'll get with Representative Collings to get the background on that.
Okay, thanks.
Rachel talked to him. Did you want to share that?
Well, I guess my understanding was, yeah, that the bill wasn't forward.
Oh, Rachel, can you speak closer to the mic, please?
I'm not saying anything. Just to clarify that when I spoke with Ben Collins, the impression I got from him was that, yeah, the bill would have to be recreated again in the future, that it wasn't moving forward, but it could be brought forward next year.
Okay, I tell you what, why don't I get back with him and just see what background he has, who he's already talked to, and if he's already got a list of ideas or something, and then I'll get back to the group here.
Great.
Yeah, so just being on the legislative committee, this is Darren. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of, it's like what do they call it? It's like watching the sausage get made. I guess my own personal disappointment was, and I've mentioned this before, the legislators themselves, their lack of grasp of key concepts that impact tribal people was more than worrying to me. And I guess I would want to figure out with all of you, like how to, I know this is an endemic problem, that educating legislators about the basic principles of federal Indian law that we have to wrestle with, even despite the interpretations of the Settlement Act and all that. And then just basic legal concepts that the I mean, there's someone on judiciary, I won't mention their name, but as someone who actually educates other people, did not know the difference between sovereignty and sovereign immunity, for example. If you're going to be the person writing the laws of a state, you would think that basic concepts like sovereign immunity and sovereignty would be something you could command. So I guess I worry going forward, and look, a lot was accomplished in this recent legislation. I want to just commend where we've come, because I think it's those two pieces of legislation that were referenced before are huge advances. And I, whatever made that happen, I'm going to say that a lot of people spend a lot of time educating folks in order for that to happen. And I think as we think about the role of MITSC and doing that kind of education as well, and what role we can have to arming, and we have someone who is called into judiciary in our audience here. I'm not going to get someone from the AG, and she and others, both on the AG and then the tribal legal side, they were available and answered a lot of questions that, and I guess one of my thoughts is in training the people in the legislature who do the analysis for the bills. I wonder if there's a way we can support them in their training in terms of some of this more nuanced sort of legal training as well. So that was one thing that kind of came to mind. I mean, obviously, people can get elected to our state. I mean, they don't need to know anything about the law or anything, obviously, to be elected. But I think once they're in that position of writing the laws that we have to abide by, that we try as hard as we can to arm them with the kind of information. I just take that so seriously as an educator. So I guess that was a reveal that I hadn't quite, until I was on MITSC, I hadn't followed the sausage being made as attentively as maybe I should have. And I mean, I've been to the legislature before, and I've heard tribal, legislation that would impact our tribes be debated before. But I guess in terms of just even those on the judiciary, sort of they're giving whatever capacities they have in particular, I think would be important. So that's my comment. And what a significant, these two pieces of legislation are just hugely significant things that were accomplished that I think 5 years ago or 6 years ago might have seemed impossible. So to that end, I think it's also really amazing.
Other comments? Zeke and James is the lowest they were also on that committee.
I wonder who's still on the line here. I know, Vice Chief Newell was there.
Speak up, please. Please speak up.
Okay, I mean, so from my conversations I've had with the chief and the direction that she still has is the same as before, and it's, I mean, it's just frustration with the process a bit, but it's also optimism for the future, particularly when it comes to 1626 and the commitment to continue this fight. And we're going to keep at it and keep going. I mean, it's a bit frustrating. It's more than a bit frustrating, but it is it's the process. And you know, the decision our ancestors made long ago was to form a relationship and to keep attempting to walk this path side by side. And that's the direction I've received, that we will continue to do so. But the good news about 585 and 906. That's wonderful.
Thanks, Zeke. James, I wanted to specifically ask you as a member of that committee if you had anything you wanted to add on this.
Not necessarily anything more than folks have said previously. Maybe just a bit of context, and this is very general, but I think it might be helpful to know that in terms of what was accomplished, I would agree with others that I think it was historic. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what a lot of interests were looking for. But to have passed what passed in this legislative session, which was extremely contentious, especially towards the end, which was a hybrid session, which was, you know, extremely hard to advocate, no matter what interest you were advocating for. You know, I do think that at a minimum, what happened was symbolic and demonstrates that there's desire on the state's part to continue furthering the ball down the field in recognition of tribal interests. Again, I'm not claiming that it's perfect or that it accomplished even close to what some would like to accomplish. But as Richard and many of us know that work in that building on a daily basis, legislation takes a lot of time, especially in this environment, and especially when it is as comprehensive and dynamic as tribal-state relations. So that's not an excuse. That's not to satisfy everybody. That is simply to say that you know, in terms of what was accomplished, I think job well done, especially in this environment.
Thanks for those comments, James. Any other commissioners who wanted to comment on this issue of the legislative session?
Question. So, so 906 technically changed the small way.
Yes.
Was that the first time it's been changed?
No, it's not the first change that's ever been made to them. It's significant.
Can you speak closer to the mic, please?
Yes, and no, it's not the first change that's been made to the Maine Implementing Act. And it's not the first change with respect to jurisdictional authority. There have been some other changes, particularly, for instance, the violence against women change that was made last year. But it's significant to accord the you know, the tribe that ability to deal with the safety of their water. It was a jurisdictional issue, and it was significant.
The bills that established designated seats
2 sessions ago, some were this session,
I think they were all
they
last.
all this session.
I think they were all last, the first session of this legislature.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
When I say this session, I'm talking about.
Yes, they were all in the first
So
year.
there were several,
Yes,
there were several bills. Some specific and small, some big and comprehensive. And so there were several others on it. When you run the list, you include that designated University of Maine seat, that and the designated seats on a series of other. I think most of those passed.
yes, and I'm glad you reminded us of that, Richard, and the police academy is another.
Criminal Justice Academy. Right, so there was that is all part of that answer.
That's a good point. Take that broader view of the whole legislative.
I mean, I think when you run the list, if you run the list for the last 4 years, the 129th session, the 130th session, and you really do see quite a bit. You start seeing momentum. And momentum works to a tipping point. Accelerates. So I think that's what you're saying.
Is that a prediction?
It's just every time, in my experience, if there is a major effort being advanced, education reform, environmental reform, criminal justice reform, tribal relations, whatever it is, that groundwork, just continuous, just here is no progress, then all of a sudden, there seems to be movement. And so I think, look at 129 to 130 of this, list everything. The school mascots, the name of places, all these things come together, build to bigger and bigger action. The awareness is the body. So to your point, I think it could be a celebration of what is quite substantial. And it just, I think it will build.
Thank you for that, Richard. Any other comments on this legislative agenda, please?
I'd say that seemed like such an important point that you just shared, and big picture, such good news directionally. I wonder if it would be worth doing a short document that looks at both of those sections, grabs everything positive, and just lists it. That might be a piece that could help more people see the momentum as an important part of momentum building. It's for more people to see momentum building.
You're part of it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's something Rachel and I could put together. Get it on the website, incorporate it into our mailing, our emailing. So, yeah.
And it might help everybody who's advocating so tirelessly see the pieces of the fruits of those efforts, and just help us feel a bit better. Well, there's still so much to do.
Zeke?
I forget who mentioned it earlier, but I think it's clear what we saw was the will of the people of Maine, what they want, what we all want. You know, the bills passing through House and Senate and then stalling. But this is what we all want and what we want to eventually get to. So, I mean, if we can look at the silver lining there and hope moving forward. Hope hopefully, hopefully create something.
Thank you, Zeke. I think probably. Sarah,
You mentioned the letter that the chiefs sent. I don't recall seeing that. I'm wondering if that's something that somebody could provide to this MITSC commission. Thanks.
Yeah, I think if you haven't seen, if commissioners haven't seen it, you really should read it. It's a very thoughtful.
I'm sure it is. I would like to read it.
I do think at this point, we need to go on with the agenda. I don't know that we're gonna get through everything. We had told folks we'd be done by 3:30, and it's after 3 now. The next item, I think, would have been staff updates on current developments. And then I think that's gonna be, for me, that's probably gonna become a piece of what I do as the managing director report, but I want to give Rachel a chance if she wants to hit on some particular things in terms of
Yeah, I can send them
developments.
out.
Hand this down.
Okay, just a brief summary of some things. I've been following the PFAS issues, and there was success in that area. 2 of the PFAS bills passed, and I believe have been signed into law, and then also the out-of-state waste that was coming in, that bill passed, so that's now that has been stopped. And then another positive thing to report with regard to the threat of the Wolfden mine in Pembroke, Maine, is that the town of Pembroke did vote overwhelmingly to create an ordinance to protect the town from the Big Silver Wolfden mine and other mines intending to do something similar. And then I guess we'll talk about retreat potential later. I also wanted to just put it out there, and I can follow up on with an email, but I have applied on behalf of MITSC for a booth at the Common Ground Fair in the political action tent to promote who we are and what we're doing. And I would love any of you who are able to join that booth for any amount of time would be wonderful. So yeah, it's in September.
Third weekend.
Yeah. I'll send you the dates, but I think it's like
September.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I sent out the homepage to all of you that we've been working on for the new website with the Broadreach grant funds, and thank you to all of you who gave feedback. We're excited about that project and should be wrapping up by the end of June with this phase of things. So hopefully we'll have a lot more to show and get feedback on in the next month or so. And then I can send out information, but I had heard from a woman representing Amber Alert in Indian country, and they're trying to help. They're providing free training and a free Amber Alert in Indian country and an Indian country technology toolkit to federally recognized tribes. And this woman just asked me to pass that information on to our tribal commissioners. I can send you her contact via email if you want to share that in appropriate places in your communities. That's pretty much what I have to say. Thank you.
Oh, and I just, seems like I'm the only one loud enough who doesn't need a microphone. I've gone so far.
Which is
without
ironic.
it.
It is ironic.
Yeah, seriously. The guy who doesn't have a voice. But I just want to say, I think in addition to being an amazing person in so many different ways, that Rachel's had a huge positive impact on it. Just want to say, for the record, great job and thank you.
All right, well, I think, and we need to keep moving. We've had the Holter Chem issue on the agenda before. We had some brief discussion of it, I believe, with me expressing the view that I believe that MITSC is literally a stakeholder with respect to mitigation efforts. And I think Richard brought this issue. It was Richard really who brought it to the commission. And I think Darren had commented also on the importance of MITSC asserting itself, because we really are a stakeholder. We have a regulatory authority regarding waters that are impacted. So I wanted to bring it back and get the thoughts of the group, but I feel that this should be on the work plan, that we should be, actively looking for MITSC to be involved as one of the stakeholders with respect to the mitigation efforts regarding Holter County. Richard?
Yeah, I mean, I only raised it so large, and it's such a honestly, I know I just finalized.
Excuse me, can you get that microphone closer, please? Can't hardly hear you. Thank you.
Hear that?
So it's to basically is to keep an eye on the case, to watch closely how this final steps unfold. Hundreds of millions of dollars of litigation, taking a variety of forms along the Hopscotch. So it's at that stage now after I think my first involvement in both of them started 5. And so whether there is a direct impact or not from the MITSC perspective, I'm not sure. Components of the Settlement Act have a lot ahead. So how the implementation, and nothing else. We watch it.
Well,
I don't think it was said. I think it's still with the court approving the settlement, right? Should soon though. I think because they were. Sorry, I was an expert witness on the most recent iteration of it because I get involved in everything. But yeah, I think when I talked to the lawyers the last time, I think they were hoping by June, July. So it should be resolved. I mean, both parties agreed to ostensibly agreed to the settlement. So it would be unusual for the court to not agree to it. So yeah, so going forward, it'll be by the end, I think this summer. And then of course, as you mentioned, Richard, it's going to take hundreds of millions of dollars. It's decades worth, I think 20 years or something to resolve.
Yeah, you have areas that are identified for solve an obstacle. Specific downstream area from specific all the communities, private entities.
Yeah, you. My understanding of it.
Yeah, so to the report that we talked about for, I don't know, several hours before. No, I'm joking. Because of anadromous fish, primarily, the sort of upstream, downstream dynamics, they tried to, and that was part of the reason I was an expert witness, was to think about anadromous fish pollution, mercury impacts to anadromous fish impacting tribal fishing and fisheries. So yeah, that's contemplated in this as well. And I think that's partly why we need to be paying attention, because I think in terms of the water, the MITSC waters and all that, it's definitely a live issue.
I would take from that basically a directive, just that we get more information, we stay on this, make it part of staff work going forward, all of this, and just report back to the commission. So the next item on the agenda, well, probably it makes sense. No, I want to. The next item would be administrative updates, committee reports. Reappointment of commissioners. I think the discussion about the administrative updates and the report from the committee probably would make sense in connection with my report, my director report. But I do think we want to again call particular attention to the appointments. I think we have. Rachel, maybe you can give us a quick update on where we're at with that. Yes, Bert.
Yeah, first of all, that mic that Richard was talking into, I don't think was on. Anyway, I can hardly hear what he's saying. But as far as the appointments for Darren and myself, I communicated with Chief Francis last night, and he said he will be taking care of that pretty quick. So we'll be taken care of.
Okay, thank you for that. Rachel?
Joey got us his. I might have to ask.
Yeah, I guess so. I need to have some letter. From my conversation with her.
Yeah,
I can
we
send you
need
an
you
email with
written
your exact dates that it would say.
The same would go for me too.
Yes, I'll follow.
Okay.
Right.
And on the
Bolton Bay has to keep its representation as the best looking delegation.
And on the state side, not to put everybody else. Do you have any information for us, Richard?
I had a
As a group, or?
no, I mean.
Oh.
Kevin?
Well, I mean, my understanding is most of the state commissioners aren't coming back, but I don't need for everybody.
Well, we know that
Who do we know that's not coming back?
James has indicated that he's still on. We can confirm that. James has, you can't hear me right now, Bob? You're muted.
Now I hear you. Sorry.
That much difference. So again, not putting people on the spot, but it's my understanding that Sarah's indicated that she won't be doing another term.
That's correct. Sometime this fall.
I think you were a little later.
September.
Yeah. James and John Cashwell have both indicated they wouldn't be seeking to be reappointed. I believe Bob has indicated he will. It's right here, Mike's right in front of me.
Yeah, it's funny though how that mic picks up. Sometimes it just seems like it's a talking stick. One person passes it to another, but we don't hear anything. But yes, nobody in the governor's office has asked me to stay on, but I probably would have asked.
Okay.
Are you undecided? You're still thinking.
Yeah, I need, really, what I'm seeking is, directional clarity from all 13 terms of the. Hello, Bert. So I'm seeking directional clarity from the governments that appoint to MITSC. It's we've had the members. Governor Mills made a commitment that she would fill those seats that were allowed to become vacant, and she fulfilled that commitment with this current slate of 6 state commissioners, and it has been educational and enlightening, but a lot has happened, and a lot has occurred even as we reviewed the legislative accomplishments. Some that will impact MITSC directly and some indirectly. And so what I'm seeking is not so much an understanding from the members of the commission, but from the leaders of the governments, all the governments, of what the expectation is of the commission in the new environment going forward. And because I personally feel that we're disconnected. I don't get the sense that the tribal members are always feeling as though they're connected with the strategy of whatever the governing, whether it's the council or the chief is pursuing, and that's the same case in the state. And this last year was a good example of that. We spent a lot of time talking about what we should be doing as it relates to these pieces of proposed legislation. But the tribal leadership and the state leadership were in direct negotiations for a year. Now, I'm not sure any of us were aware of that or not, but it revealed that the top governing leaders of the governments were talking to each other, which is great. And we're making progress without MITSC. And so to me, I would just like to kind of get a sense of that those of us who serve on this, these have touch base.
And I was thinking about that with the item, of the retreat. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure that it's the commission members. Retreat. I think it's, again, governing leadership in terms of directing or assigning the portfolio that you want your representatives on the commission to carry forward. Rather than this idea that we have to just draw from the statute and then figure it out for ourselves. So I'm trying to say something positive. What I'm saying is progress has occurred, which really, other than just, the statute, makes the question, what is MITSC supposed to in the new environment going forward with the progress? Direct communication is better, so we don't miss the direct communication, talking to each other. Legislative progress occurred. Ultimately, we didn't have to necessarily, or we weren't seen as essential to having made that legislative action occur. So what do the governments want us to do in the new environment?
Yeah, I think that's brilliant and what you've done. It's so admirable. And that's pretty much where I'm at too. I mean, I've said for a while now, I'm not planning on redoing. That's the current course I'm on. Something substantial that's different would have to come up for me to renew, because I want to use a portion of my time in life to try to help Native communities. And I'm not sure I'm helping Native communities in a meaningful way, the way this commission's presently constructed, or to say it differently, under its charter is what I mean to say, meaning compared to what I could do on my own, people that I know. I think the MITSC charter personally is totally outdated. Totally outdated. And very constricting. I was thinking about what John Banks said when he spoke earlier, and imagining how much fun that would be when he remembered back to a time when the governor and the tribal chiefs met every year, in part to decide what they wanted MITSC to do. That would be fun. That would be exciting. That would be worth working on. But it is, we've talked about before, I'm closing in on the end of my third year. I've not heard from anybody in any government about the work we're doing. And I just feel like it's in a vacuum. So my current plan is not to renew. My current plan is to keep trying to find ways to be meaningful to tribal communities in Maine. But if something were to change about the potential path of MITSC's mission, I would be interested in that too, but the clock is kind of ticking on that. That would have to happen pretty quickly at this point. And then the last part I did want to mention too is that I feel like we really need to get our own house in order in terms of when and how we meet. It's so easy to get preoccupied with what everybody else is doing. But I've really struggled with our schedule, and I think we've really struggled with an absence of leadership consistency. I don't mean this negatively at all, because I'm sure there are great reasons, but have we had a meeting yet that our new chair's been able to be at?
He was virtually. Yeah.
But I just would say, I don't see any point in meeting without our chair. None. Zero. And just for comparison with other groups I'm on, the 2023 schedule's already set.
Well, that
Say
is-
nothing about 2022. And the problem now with even looking at fall retreat is most people's falls are already pretty booked. So the scheduling, the leadership inconsistency, which is not anybody's fault, the outdated, to me, mission, and then my desire to actually really want to help. I just want to emphasize that. That's the only reason I'm here, would be to be of value to tribal communities. And I have to compare the use of this time against imagine other ways to be of help. I appreciate the question. I apologize for the long answer, because the short answer is I'm still on a track to not renew, but the kinds of things Richard's inquired about would definitely be of interest to me too.
Well, and the next item was to be, to talk about the meetings, the retreat. Richard's made an interesting comment about that. I have somewhat different view. I think MITSC actually has a broader purview statute than solely focusing on the main implementing act. I mean, it says the legal, social, and economic relationships in the state and the tribe. And I think that's not limited to just governmental issues. That's always been my view. And it's one of the reasons I wanted the job, because I was interested, based on my background in Indian legal services, in this being a way to improve conditions for people on the reservations and in neighboring non-Indian communities. So I've always felt that MITSC has, in my opinion, the authorization, the purview to go outside of just continually trying to talk about the implementing act. And obviously the situation has changed, where in the past, the tribes, I mean, to be honest, the state has seldom brought issues to MITSC. I wasn't with MITSC all the time, but I think over the course of its history, there haven't been very many occasions when the state has really brought issues to MITSC. For a long time, the tribes brought issues to MITSC, hoping that MITSC could be a useful vehicle to address issues and make some progress. And I think understandably, the tribes became frustrated that on many occasions, MITSC recommendations or MITSC, activities that MITSC supported, studies and so forth, from the tribe standpoint, they really didn't generate any positive outcomes. And so now the tribes have moved in a direction of having more direct their own direct relationship. New entities have formed. There is a new environment. And I feel that MITSC does need to re-examine itself and its role. And it may be that it can't be done effectively without the kind of input that that Richard, Kevin are talking about from the governments. But I don't believe it depends entirely on that. I believe MITSC has, a broader statutory purview than that, if it chooses to pursue it, in terms of the legal, social, and economic relationships.
I'll make a and the council too, is another big development. Forums. I think one of the things that MITSC has to wrestle with in this new environment of new opportunity is that it's a creature of the act. And if the dominant conclusion really in the state in general and in the legislature is that the 1980 Act is has failed, then by inference, MITSC can't succeed because it's a creature of the act. So there's almost a sub-level conflict in seeing MITSC succeed if the act is a failure. I think that is part of the discussion.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump in on that too. I think there is a scenario in which MITSC as constructed, losing some of its relevancy is actually a successful, positive, progress-oriented moment, that it's not all negative. But were that to be the case, MITSC would then have to reinvent itself. To your point, Paul, to stay, and to yours, Richard, to stay fresh and relevant in that new world order. Now, I agree with what you said. I have not felt like we need to be as limited to statute as it seems we've been. I happen to take your view on that, Paul, but you, I think, too, would recognize that every time we get in a gray area, we bog down over it because some part of the committee will say that's beyond our purview. So it hasn't been government oversight that's limited us. It's been our own disagreements over our purview that have limited us. But I finally want to say too, most important, because I don't want any of this to be negative, just personally, this has been a great joy to be on this commission. It's been a huge blessing for me, and I've gotten a ton out of it. I've met amazing people from the state side and the tribal side. I've learned a great deal about tribal issues, history, values, priorities, and I am really thankful for the opportunity, and it's been very, very positive for me. I don't want to get bogged down in the reasons why I might not do it again because it's been a blessing to be with this group, and I feel like I've gotten way more from it than I've given, and I'm thankful for that.
Well, that being said, and we've now gone beyond the time that we posted for the meeting, but and I do appreciate everybody's hanging in there. We do need to do something about setting another meeting or meetings. Bert, go ahead, Bert.
Just really quick, if you believe that or not. I'll say this, yes, there are things that I think we can expand on without going totally out of the way, by maintaining what our responsibilities are. But I think, like you said, Kevin, sometimes we kind of limit just strictly to that. Nothing in that says that we can't expand. Nothing in our statute, the statute say we can't expand. And I think that, I personally would love to see you stay on, Kevin, as well as you, Richard. Richard, you know your way around that legislative body, over at the State House. We need that knowledge. We need that experience to help us find our way through, because there are some things that we have to make changes to and at this point without having to worry about how we're going to change statutes. But like I said, to Kevin was, I think the statutes are there. We have to stay, utilize those, but I don't think there's anything limiting us from expanding how we go about our job. So I just wanted to say that. Then thank you. I want to thank all the commissioners actually.
Thank you, Bert. So not to get back to, I know it's a relatively mundane topic compared to this, but we do need to decide about next meeting or next meetings. We've got fishing report pending. So I'd say we've got a budget to talk about, and I don't know if you would still want to even go into that stuff today. And it folds together with the administrative committee meeting and my report and so forth. But I guess whether we can really defer that depends on when we're going to have another meeting. So.
Well, hadn't we sort of already penciled in second Friday? I thought everyone had.
Then I'll shut up.
Well, I think we have.
On my calendar.
Yeah, we ought to find out when the fishing report will be updated, because it would be good to review that before the meeting, at least have a few days before the meeting. But I think that Friday we've got penciled in would work all right.
I think the only question should be, where do we want to have it?
I do think we can do the fishing study.
Yeah,
stuff
okay.
In that time frame. But
I think continuing this conversation about the role of MITSC moving forward, we should have that conversation.
I had an idea that, but if it were helpful, I could even meet with each of you as commissioners. We could come up with and get your really deep thoughts on this topic. And then I could collate them all and present them back to all of you. And we could just be like before the meeting, and really interesting to see what comes out.
Even if you had a phone call with each of us, not necessarily meet in person, that might be informative. I didn't speak up today, but I share some of the thoughts that that everybody has expressed. But I don't want to prolong the discussion, so I'll stop there.
I think it's worth pointing out that for the past 4 years, the task force has been meeting to discuss how we will change the implementing act and the role of it moving forward, if there really will be a role. So we've been a bit redundant for the past 4 years here. Now that the 1626 hasn't moved forward, that means there will still be a place for us for at least a while here. And have the discussion of what that would look like.
The other part of that is that a lot of this happened without us. The governor and state agencies and tribal representatives were meeting and working on all of this. And yeah, we were working on it too, but in the end, it's what they did that really mattered. So with the new direction to have a formal tribal state consultation process, I think it would be wise to see what that's going to look like and whether there's a role for MITSC in that, or I don't know. I've sort of felt disconnected. I haven't had any conversations with the governor's office, nor have I had any conversations with tribal members except for at these meetings. And I've kind of felt we're working in a bit of a vacuum. And, you know, we may do great work, but if the rest of the world doesn't care, I don't know. There were a lot of reasons that I'm not re-upping, other than that. I mean, personal reasons, not being here and stuff, but. So, and another thing I think we have to discuss is where we go from here with leadership. And I think you were maybe gonna, I think you put this out to us, that you were gonna suggest that maybe you stay on part-time and work from your new home. And I think that makes a lot of sense, considering where we are in this transition with new legislation and maybe, and not knowing what our finances are gonna be. We didn't get any more funding this session. And Rachel is doing a fabulous job as a projects coordinator, but I kind of view her as you guys are a team. So that seems to be working pretty well. So I suggest we just keep on as we're doing with you part-time. And then our new chair, he did participate in the committee meeting the other day on the fishing study, but he hadn't read the study yet. So.
Joey,
I'm sorry, I've got to go, guys. I'll go ump a high school baseball game. So when it comes to meetings, I'm very flexible. So whatever you decide as a group, or if Rachel reaches out, I'm fine with. I'm sorry I couldn't be there today, but because of this commitment to ump high school baseball I had prior to this meeting, I just have to go. I appreciate everybody though.
thanks for hanging in there,
Thanks,
Joey.
Joey.
Thanks.
And I apologize that I had spaced out that we already had a meeting. So, all right. But-
Yeah, and maybe I can follow up by email to decide about.
Well, are we gonna do another hybrid? What's the sense of those who did come? Or do we?
Well, I can't go to the June meeting. I probably missed it, but I'm not going to be around. But I don't think we should have any more hybrid meetings in person. I don't see any reason, unless someone's got a particular issue. I think we miss being at the table face to face, and I think hybrids hard.
I agree that being at a table face-to-face is a much better way to meet. But given the geographic spread of our commissioners and the multiple things that they have going on in their lives, I think probably a Zoom meeting is going to be easier for people to make. Richard and I only live 30 or 4 minutes from here. Kevin had quite a hike to get here. He's willing to do it, but, and I don't know, well, you had quite a hike, so, and several people did, but I don't know.
That's all. So where I go back to something Bert's been talking about, I think I'd rather see fewer, longer meetings. I'd rather block out a day a quarter, and I'll show up as early as you want that day, stay as late as you want that day. I think trying to do monthly 3-hour meetings, it does not work great because it's not easy to get everybody together from the distances we're coming from. I'd rather see fewer but longer meetings. I'd even go for quarterly day-and-a-half meetings over monthly meetings. I cannot, like on that issue alone, I wouldn't be able to come back. I can't do monthly 3-hour meetings, and we never finish in 3-hour meetings ever.
Well, we were limiting ourselves to 2 hours for a long time, but okay. Well,
but that's kind of what you're talking about, collecting feedback on what this might look like
Yeah, as a springboard, obviously it's not a replacement. for actual. This, I think, I could do that and we could gain a lot of ground and have some really thought. And what, I just want to say that what I observe of this group is that group of people, and I would like to see it give itself the broadest, most expensive movement in the month. All's, you know, like we stated, that allows for that broader interpretation. And I think it's time that it's like everyone issues that together and
Do whatever we want.
Yeah, I like that. So, should we leave it? Are we gonna make a decision today about whether we're meeting in person or not, or do we just need to follow up?
Let's let Rachel recontact people and figure out the,
I think, condition of COVID, you have to allow the option.
At least for those who want to be in person. We agree? Well, it's hard. It was hard on those who weren't here, but
I mean, I'm sure we can come back here. We should solve the technical issue.
I didn't hear a single thing you said.
Although, maybe we not solve the thing where Bert can't hear us. We can keep that problem.
all right. I guess, were we ready to hear a motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye, 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 aye,
Adjourn.
aye. Well, good seeing all of you, even though I couldn't hear most of you, but anyhow, we'll figure this all out. You guys take care. Bye. I gotta go get girls from school. Well, they went to the mall since I couldn't make it to the school. So, yeah, they love the mall. All right. Take care, everyone.
Oh my gosh, really?
Through Lancaster.
I know that route pretty well. I have cousins on it. Yeah. Yeah, well, I feel better about this meeting, have some, because we at least brought up some topics that needed discussion, even though they were sort of controversial.
Those are the ones that are the most fun.
Right. Well, yeah.
There's still a lot of public.
Still on the line.
So, all right.
Always was a pleasure. Good to see you. Yeah, I know. But you made a great point.
Yeah, I will. I would sort of like to, I mean, I would sort of like to stick around in the teaching study. I know.
Yeah.
I know.
If you're,
And I'll
if you're open to
see
coming north sometime like
how
before
that
we
goes.
We really
Well, I,
hung in there.
well, I'm gonna hang in there for a little while.
Yeah.